Today we're beginning a new series we're calling We Should Talk. We should talk. Because I don't know about you, but I've noticed, and probably you have too, that when it comes to things like our mental health, our brain health, we don't talk much. We don't talk much in our society. We're talking more, but we still don't talk much, especially in faith circles. At some point, it kind of started seeming like there was a lack of faith if you decided that to be brave enough to say, I'm struggling with depression, or I'm struggling with anxiety, I'm struggling with this or with that. But we should talk more. We should talk more about this, because the truth is, if you really were to look at it, there's a lot of people around you who are struggling with things like their mental health. A few years back, in 2023, the National Alliance on Mental Illness released the results of this study, and it said this, that 23% of adults struggle with mental health. 23, that means almost 1 in 4 people, 1 in 4 adults you know struggles with mental health. Of those 23%, 34% are young adults. Young adults, probably in that 18 to 30, 18 to 35 range. That's 1 in 3. But of those 23% we just talked about, 55% did not receive any treatment. And you have to wonder why. There's all kinds of resources out there. There's all kinds of resources available. Even if you were to go to our website right now, churchonthedrive.org, you could find an entire section that shows you all the resources to go to. There's all kinds of resources out there that are funded publicly and privately. There's all kinds of ways to access things, but people aren't even trying to get treatment. A lot of times people don't even know that those around them are struggling with mental health. It's because we don't talk enough. We don't talk enough. We need to talk more. It's so prevalent. It's so prevalent that you are going to run into somebody who's struggling with their mental health. That is, if you're not already struggling with your mental health. We should talk more about this, shouldn't we? But we don't. And I think one of the reasons is because we've been fed this lie, and we've picked up on this message that all I have to do is say that I'm fine, and then other people are happier with me. I mean, think about it. When was the last time you were kind of struggling? Maybe you weren't really struggling with your mental health. You didn't have depression, didn't have anxiety, anything like that. You were just having a really bad season, a bad day, a bad week. You were going through some tough stuff, right? Somebody walked up and they said, hey, how you doing? What's your response? Great. Things are great. I mean, never mind the fact that your eyes twitching, you got 3 hours of sleep over the last 2 days. Right? You don't know if you're going to have a job tomorrow, but you're still great. I'm doing wonderful. Everything. And realistically, nobody wants to hear you say anything else, do we? It's our polite greeting. We picked up on this message. Some years back, I got tired of doing this because I felt like I was lying when I was going through a bad spate, right? And so I started telling people exactly how I was. And they said, Josh, how you doing? Terrible. You know what I found out? Nobody wanted to talk to me anymore. Nobody wants to talk to that guy, right? But we should be able to talk about these things going on in our life. But unfortunately, what we've understood, at least from an early age, I think most of us figure this out. If I say I'm fine, people are happier with me. But what if that's not helpful? What if that's ultimately not helpful? What if there are real issues and real struggles that real people have that need to be dealt with? And what if those people need a place where they can be honest, where they can be vulnerable, and where they can find some kind of healing that they might not find anywhere else? Church should be the place where you don't have to pretend. It should be the place where you can find healing with other people. You shouldn't have to pretend in here that you got something that's not going on. You should be able to say, I've got this thing going on. Because here's the truth. We know it just from the numbers. Mental illness is real. Struggles with our mental health are real. And what's just as real as those struggles is the stigma that comes with them. Because the second I say, I'm struggling with depression, I'm struggling with anxiety, with panic attacks, I've got bipolar disorder, I've got this, the second we say those things, Suddenly there's a stigma attached to us. And the hard thing about the stigma is if other people buy into it as much as you do, we start removing people from lives, don't we? We start saying, oh, well, we can't have that person around. They might go crazy. Can't have that person around. They might say something off the wall. Can't have that person around because they might do this or they might do that. And so even if we have the smallest struggle with our mental health, we're like, I'm not admitting that to anybody because we don't want anybody to say anything about us. I don't think it has to be that way, though. I don't think it has to be that way because Jesus offers us a better way, something better than that, something better than any of us has maybe ever experienced. He offers something better and more life-giving than that. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus was on the side of a hill. They called everything a mountain over there, but it's really more of a hill. And he's standing there on the side of this hill, and he's preaching what is widely considered his greatest sermon, probably the greatest sermon of all time. And he's giving this sermon. He's talking about you should do this, and you should not do this. You should be like these people, but don't be like these people. You should do this, but don't do this. And in the middle of it, he says something that has sunk its way into our modern culture, something that people who aren't Christians and who will never be Christians say all the time. Something that you have probably said. If you were a teenager, you probably said this. If you were in college, you probably said this multiple times. And you quoted Jesus maybe even when you said it. Jesus said this, do not judge, or you too will be judged. I mean, how many times have you heard that? Don't judge me. Only God can judge me. We even get tattoos on it, right? Hopefully they're spelled right when we get them too. Don't judge me. How dare you? Who are you to judge me? Who are you to judge me? Because what we mean by that is you shouldn't tell me whether I'm doing something right or wrong. Like you are not the person who's supposed to be the arbiter of what is right or wrong. I will choose what's right and wrong for me. I have my own truth and I'm going to do it. But that's not what Jesus means. If you go and you read through the Gospels, if you read through the Sermon on the Mount itself, it's clear that Jesus believes in an absolute truth. He believes in this absolute truth. He believes in absolute right and absolute wrong. He believes in these things, and he thinks you should too. In fact, throughout the Sermon on the Mount, he points to things that are right, and he points to things that are wrong. And he points to people who are doing things that are right and people who are doing things that are wrong. And he says, stay away from those people and not away from these people. Now, this word, judge, when we translate it from the Greek, we forget that sometimes it can have a couple of different meanings from the Greek. So when we hear judge, we think things like moral discernment, right and wrong. But really what Jesus is after here is personal condemnation. And to condemn is different. To condemn is to declare someone hopelessly guilty with no room for restoration. Well, in context, if you go to read through the entire Sermon on the Mount, this is truly what Jesus means here. When he says don't judge, he's really saying do not condemn others. Don't declare somebody else hopelessly guilty with no room for restoration. There's a way back. It's not your role to do that. It's not your job to do that. And here's why you want to be really careful, Jesus says. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Now that works on a practical level, doesn't it? Like if you've ever been around, if you've ever been around somebody who's always talking badly about other people or always casting judgment on other people and saying they need to just be left off over here, nobody needs to talk to them. If you've ever been around somebody like that, you know that ultimately gets visited back on them, doesn't it? People find out all the stuff they're saying and nobody trusts them. It works on a practical level. But Jesus means it on a spiritual level too. He's saying when you judge others, when you condemn others, and you say that they are hopelessly guilty and there's no hope of restoration, what you're doing is you're cutting them off. You're cutting them off and you are taking on God's role. There's only one who can condemn. There's only one who can be the true judge who says, all right, it's done. There's no hope of restoration. And you're not God. So whenever we go about judging in a way that condemns, we're usurping God's role. Well, that opens each and every one of us who does that up to God's judgment and to God's condemnation, because now we've made an idol out of ourselves. We've made ourselves God. Jesus said, watch out. It will be measured back to you that way. That scares me enough not to do it, I think. But Jesus goes on, he says this, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? He says, how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your eye? What a visual. What a visual, right? There's a little bit of sawdust there in your brother or sister's eye, and you've got a log coming out of your eye. Hey, imagine that for a second. If I had a log coming out of my eye and I said, hey, you got some sawdust in there. Let me get that for you. Let me blow it out. How ridiculous would that be? How dumb is that? And Jesus says, that's what you're like. That's what you're like. Now see, Jesus isn't saying there's no room for right and wrong and moral discernment. He's not saying that at all. What he's saying is, you need to take care of your own business first. You need to figure things out for yourself before you start trying to figure them out for everybody else. Don't you dare try to remove the plank from somebody else's eye before you start dealing with your own stuff. That's how you get yourself in trouble. That's how you run people off. That's how you make God mad. That's how you make yourself believe you are God. Jesus says, remember who you are. And then he rounds it all out by saying in this, you hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Now, notice that. He doesn't say, recognize that you have a plank in your own eye and just walk away and never say anything to him. Let them live their life. Let them live their life according to their truth. What does he say? You'll see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. So handle your business so you can help them. If you truly see something going on there that's going wrong and they need help, take care of your business before you try to help them. I don't know when the last time you flew with small children was, but every time that you get on the airplane, they come across and they say, all right, listen up, pay attention to the flight attendants. And they start doing all the stuff with the seatbelts and doing all this. Most of the time, we're not even watching. We'll watch the lady, and finally they say, when the masks come down, in case we lose cabin pressure, the masks are going to come down, and then you need to put them on. Parents, if you're traveling with small children, put your mask on first, and then put your child's mask on. Not long ago, I was traveling with my kids, and Sawyer, my 8-year-old, heard this, and she was offended. She said, what? No, Daddy, you're supposed to help me first. I said, no, I'm supposed to help me first. And she said, how come? Why would that be? I'm your daughter. I said, I know, but I got to be able to take care of me first. Otherwise, if the cabin pressure goes down too fast, I'll probably pass out and I won't be able to help you, and then you'll be passed out too. And she goes, okay, fine. We got to take care of our own business before we try to help somebody else. We got to put our mask on first before we try to put somebody else's mask on. I want you to imagine something. Imagine there's somebody that you know, a friend, a family member, an acquaintance even, and they always show up to these parties or these gatherings that you have together with other people. And you start noticing that although they have traditionally and historically been the life of the party and they stay to the end, that suddenly they start doing the old Irish goodbye. You know what I mean? Like they just leave. They do the dip. Like they get out of there. They don't tell anybody goodbye, nothing like that. Now, the first time you're like, oh, that's kind of weird. Second time, okay, whatever. Then you start noticing it happens every single time, over and over. They're just gone. And then you start noticing they're not even showing up to the stuff that they say they're going to go to. You say, hey, you coming to this thing down at the restaurant with us? Yeah, I'll be there. And then they don't show up. Happens a few times. Well, if you're like most people, that's going to perturb you after a little bit, isn't it? You're going to be a little bit upset about that. And maybe you start talking to other people. You say, man, can you believe her? She's not even showing up to this stuff. She says she's going to be there, then she doesn't show up. And you know what else? She always leaves things early, and she doesn't even say goodbye. She just gets out of there. Like who is she? How dare? And you get yourself worked up into a lather, man. You're just ready to go. And you go, you know what? I'm going over there. I'm going to talk to her. You go to her house. They answer the door. Hey, how come you keep leaving parties early? Obviously, you wouldn't say it that way, but let's just for the sake, right? Why do you keep leaving parties early? How come you're not showing up? What's going on? And you're confronting. And in the midst of this confrontation, this person looks at you and says, well, I've actually been dealing with a lot of panic attacks lately. I've really been dealing with these panic attacks and a lot of social anxiety lately. I didn't want to tell anybody because I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want anybody to worry. I didn't want anybody to think I was crazy or making stuff up. But yeah, that's what's going on. Before you do things like that, Jesus is saying, slow down. Slow down and remove the plank from your own eye. And sometimes that plank can look like things like assumptions. It can look like ignorance, pride, anger. Jesus is saying, slow down before you do that and you try to help them with their speck. But that's hard. That's hard to do because the trouble with all of this is this, that when we don't understand something, our impulse is to criticize it. When we don't understand something, that's our impulse, and when we don't understand someone, it's our impulse. And what I found, if I can slow down, and if I can try to follow the example set for me by Jesus, life works out better for everybody, including me. Some time ago, my daughter was in our kitchen, and she kept grabbing this glass bowl thing, and she was taking it around. And I said, don't do that. That's glass. You're probably going to drop it. You know, the typical parent-child thing. And I made her put it up on the shelf. And so I walk out of the room, and a couple minutes later, I hear that noise, right? that crash that everybody who's ever had a child in their house has heard before. It's like a big loud crash and then absolute silence because they're afraid of what's coming next, right? And so I go running in there, and there she is, and she has dropped this glass bowl, and there's glass everywhere. There's glass just everywhere. And she's looking up at me like, oh, no. And in that moment, like, you have one of two options. The first option is you teach them a lesson. I mean, you really teach them a lesson, and you let them know, hey, what's wrong with you? I told you, leave that thing alone. Why would you do that? Why don't you ever listen? You know what? Instead, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to stand back over here, and you're going to clean all of this up. I know you're 5 years old, but you're going to clean it all up right now. You're going to learn a lesson. And that's some of our responses immediately. The other option you have is, I think, a little bit more like following Jesus. The other option you have is you scoop that child up and you make sure that they don't have any cuts on their feet from glass. You make sure they don't step on glass. You wipe them off. You wipe the tears from their eyes because they're scared at that moment. You pat them on the back until they've calmed down. You set them in a chair, and then you clean it up. Maybe you invite them to help you if they're old enough, but you get it cleaned up. Why would you do that? Because that's what people do. That's the reasonable thing to do. That's the loving thing to do. That's the kind thing to do. That's the Jesus thing to do. That's the type of example set by Jesus. Unfortunately, we don't always take that approach with our sisters and our brothers who are struggling with mental health. We criticize first. Years ago, 2,000 years ago to be exact, there was a fledgling church in Rome, and they were really trying to figure out this Jesus following thing. And it was growing pretty rapidly, this church. And as tends to happen in a group, as it gets larger and larger, there are some within that group who are much further along and some who are not. So they would have what they would call their stronger brothers and sisters and their weaker brothers and sisters. There were some who were just better at the whole Jesus following thing than others at that point. Some who found it real easy to leave behind their life before Jesus, and others who found it very difficult. There were some who were like, I can do this all the time, I'm all in, and others who weren't as good at that yet. I don't know where you find yourself, but I have found myself feeling like one of the weaker brothers before. And so Paul writes to them, and he writes them a letter, and as he's writing the letter, he starts talking about there are some of you among you who are weaker and some of you who are stronger, but you're all necessary. We need every single one of you. Rather than running anybody else down, rather than criticizing each other, rather than talking about this person is no good or this person is really good, rather than puffing yourselves up, understand that you're all needed. And then he said this, accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God. There's a few different things going on there. But the first thing I need you to understand is that word accept that's translated for us here, that word in its original context meant to actively welcome in and embrace. Have you ever had somebody over to your house, a friend, a loved one, a family member, they come in and you just wrap a big hug around them, or maybe you've been the one who received that hug? Embrace. Just as Christ welcomed you in and embraced you. You didn't earn it. You did nothing. You weren't that awesome. I mean, you're pretty cool to me, but I mean, by the standard of Jesus, by the standard of God, like, you're not that awesome. You're not worthy of his embrace. And yet, he embraced you anyways. That's the sort of embrace we have for others. That's the sort of embrace that we're supposed to have for others. I mean, what could happen if our church family, if every church could be this way for people who are struggling with their mental health, with their brain health, with their emotional health? What would it be like? What could happen? I believe this, and I promise you I do, that the local church is the greatest force for good on the face of the planet, that no one can outdo us, the local church, scattered all around the world in all its different variations, that no one can outdo us in doing good when we put our minds and our hearts to it. I really believe that. And what could happen in the mental health space if we really, truly decided we're going to begin embracing people? We're going to reject stigma. We're going to reject all of that other stuff that comes along when people start talking about mental health. We're going to make it a safe place for people to be open and vulnerable and honest. We're going to make it possible for people to receive help if they have mental health struggles. We're going to make sure they get the treatment they need. What could happen? I'm energized by the thought. I'm energized by the thought that more people will get the treatment and the help that they need before it's too late. I can't see, this is hard for me to say, I can't see another teenage suicide. Can't do it. We've had too many. Can't see another dad, can't see another mom. We've got to do something. It's our job. And the only way we're going to be able to do it is if we do this. Embrace people, not stigma. Don't allow the stigma that comes with mental health struggles in our society to invade our church space. Reject it entirely. We cannot allow it. Because nobody is beyond restoration in this place. In the kingdom of God, there's room for everybody. And it looks like all sorts of things. It looks like all sorts of things, these mental health struggles. It can be depression, it can be grief, it can be anxiety, it can be psychosis, it can be a bipolar disorder, it can be trauma, it can be addiction, you name it. It can be all sorts of things. We've got to reject the stigma that comes with that so that people can honestly talk about what's going on with them and they can find the help that they need. And you may be saying, well, how do I do that? I don't even know where to begin with that because it's so ingrained in us. Well, I have three things that I think will help all of us. It kind of all starts, though, with us deciding that we're going to be a family, that we're going to be the people of God, and that we're going to love each other no matter what. But if you do these three things, I think you'll help to reject the stigma. The first is listen before you label. If somebody's acting off, something's going wrong, you notice they're acting a little bit different, listen before you label them. There's probably a lot more to that story than you ever wanted to know. The second, offer hope, not hollow words. I wish I could tell you that I have not been in a church where somebody was depressed and people just walked up and said they needed to pray more. But that wouldn't be true. Offer hope. Say, Jesus sees you and we're with you. Not, hey, you need to pray more. Finally, walk with, not away. Walk with people. Don't walk away from them. I know it gets messy, man. Like Jesus wades into the mess with people. I don't know if you remember, there's a story about him coming upon a person really struggling out on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And he heals him. And he embraces him. He wades into the mess. That's what you and I have got to do with people. We can't, it does get messy out there with people. There are people that you're going to come across in these conversations. It does get a little bit messy when they're dealing with their depression or their anxiety or bipolar or whatever. It does get messy, but that's life. That's life. You stay around people long enough, it's going to get messy. But that's the beauty of the kingdom of God. Walk with them, not away from them. Mental illness is not a failure of faith. It's not something that we're done with people over. It's something we get to journey through life with people in. Would you do me a favor? Would you let me pray for you for just a moment? God, give us eyes to see as you see, past the surface and into the soul. Help us to reject stigma so that we might embrace others. Help us to be honest with ourselves and honest with other people about what's going on with us. And let us create a space where people can be honest with each other. Amen.